President's motorcade and his casket arriving here at Joint Base Andrews. His remains will be transferred to the military aircraft that you have been watching, along with the family who will board Special Air Mission 39, making its way back here to Georgia, specifically Columbus, Georgia, before going down to Plains.
You know, I want to add something here. You know, this whole week has been in honor of this great man, and we've seen one service after another, one movement after another, very reflective of the stature that he represented. You know, this great president. He did not always have, you know, a good life. When he left office, he was very depressed and trying to figure out what his next moves were going to be after his one term was over. In fact, when he got back home to Plains, he realized that he had to sell his peanut business because his business had fallen into default. It was $1 million in debt. And so he had to sell his business in the midst of having lost this election. It was a landslide election, and he lost it tremendously, spectacularly. And now, what was he going to do? And he was relatively young. He was 56 or so, and relatively young. What was he going to do with the rest of his life? He had all of that to figure out, as well as selling his peanut business. It was not a comfortable time for him and Rosalynn.
Inauguration Day in 1981, I still remember. I remember Jimmy Carter wearing a raincoat, and it was a very, very bleak day in Georgia, and arriving in this state, and there were the stories about how the White House staff had tried to figure out what to get him. Initially, they were going to get him a vehicle, like a Jeep that he could run around in Plains. And instead, they opted for woodworking equipment, and they went to Sears and purchased a jigsaw for him, and that was going to be installed in the garage in Plains. And that's how he sort of spent his time initially, thinking, woodworking, getting better and better making things. And it's just typical Jimmy Carter.
Right. The eternal learner.
The eternal learner, but using it as a means to try to regroup and reload, if you will, and figure out what the future would hold for him. And that future would then be tied to a handshake at Emory University with President James Laney, who offered him an opportunity to come and speak. And that sort of evolved along with Ken Stein and all of that crowd into the Carter Center.
That was huge at the time, because here's this. Because he only served 4 years for the federal government, he didn't acquire a federal pension. He didn't earn a federal pension. He didn't have federal retirement. He didn't have health benefits because he only worked for the government for 4 years. And so his health benefits came from working at Emory University as a professor.
I've really been struck too by how different this funeral is. It has a certain populism feel about it. And by that, I mean, oftentimes with men and women of great accomplishment who die, whether it's presidents or U.S. Supreme Court justices or senators or people that have had these high-profile, impactful lives. This one is different. He lived to be 100. There's nothing else to do. This is a life from beginning to middle to end is complete. Very seldom can we look at lives and say, wait, there was work to be done. He set or she set the course for others to follow. But for Jimmy Carter, it's different. He accomplished what he set out to do. He did it. His life is complete. And there is a celebration of that life in a way that we're not used to dealing with in funerals.
That's a good point, yeah.
It really is a fine point, which speaks to the hymn that I don't know whether the hymn has already been played or will be played once he gets to Georgia, but it is well with my soul. It is really sort of indicative of his full life, 100 years. It is well with my soul.
The departure ceremony getting started here in any moment, at any moment right here at Joint Base Andrews. You see the hearse, and the president's remains, as I mentioned, will be transferred to the military aircraft, followed by the family, and we will also hear shortly from the U.S. Air Force Band the music, "O Master, Let Me Walk With Thee," coming up here again before the flight arrives here in Columbus, Georgia, before traveling down to Plains, where, as we mentioned, the final resting place will be for President Carter.